Do you know what happened when a young African leader stood before the United Nations and exposed truths that powerful institutions had hidden for decades? When Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the 36-year-old president of Burkina Faso, gripped the microphone at the UN General Assembly, the entire world held its breath. His voice carried the weight of millions who had suffered in silence. And when he began speaking about the International Monetary Fund, even the most powerful delegates in that room couldn't look away. What he revealed that day would shake the foundations of global finance. Welcome to Ibrahim Traoré Voice. The first devastating truth Traoré exposed was the debt trap mechanism that has enslaved African nations for generations. Standing tall in his military uniform, he explained how the IMF approaches struggling nations with promises of economic salvation through loans. But these aren't ordinary loans. They come with interest rates that compound faster than any developing economy can grow. Traoré revealed how Burkina Faso, like many African countries, had borrowed money for infrastructure and development, only to find themselves paying back 3 times the original amount. The mathematics of it all is deliberately designed to keep nations perpetually indebted. Every dollar borrowed becomes $3 owed, and by the time a country manages to pay off one loan, they're forced to take another just to service the interest on previous debts. This isn't financial assistance, Traoré declared. This is modern colonialism wearing a suit and tie. The second wrong he laid bare was even more sinister: the structural adjustment programs. Traoré explained to the assembly how the IMF doesn't just give money and walk away. They attach conditions that fundamentally restructure a nation's entire economy. These conditions force countries to cut spending on education and healthcare, to privatize national resources, and to open their markets to foreign corporations. He shared how Burkina Faso was pressured to reduce subsidies on essential goods, making food and medicine unaffordable for ordinary citizens. The IMF calls this economic reform, but Traoré called it what it truly is: economic sabotage designed to benefit foreign interests while local populations suffer. Then came the third revelation that sent shockwaves through the assembly. Traoré exposed how the IMF forces nations to prioritize debt, repayment over human development. He presented specific examples where African governments were told to choose between paying IMF installments or building hospitals, between servicing loans or funding schools, between satisfying foreign creditors or feeding hungry children. The choice, he said, was never really a choice at all. Because if you default on IMF payments, you face economic sanctions, credit downgrades, and complete isolation from international markets. So governments choose to pay the IMF, while their people die from preventable diseases and children drop out of school because there are no teachers. The fourth wrong Traoré exposed was the currency manipulation system. He revealed how the IMF pushes African nations to devalue their currencies as a condition for receiving loans. This makes exports cheaper for Western buyers but devastates local purchasing power. A farmer in Burkina Faso works the same land, produces the same crops, but suddenly finds that his earnings can buy half as much rice or medicine as before. Meanwhile, European and American companies buy African resources at bargain prices. Traoré explained how this systematic currency devaluation has transferred trillions of dollars in wealth from African nations to Western economies over the past 5 decades. The fifth devastating truth was about resource extraction agreements. Traoré revealed confidential details about how IMF loan packages come bundled with requirements to grant mining and drilling rights to multinational corporations. These corporations extract gold, diamonds, uranium, and oil from African soil, paying minimal royalties while the profits flow to foreign shareholders. He specifically mentioned how Burkina Faso's gold mines, which should have made the nation prosperous, instead enriched foreign companies while Burkina citizens remained among the poorest in the world. The IMF, he stated, acts as a broker for corporate colonialism, using debt as leverage to pry open Africa's treasure chest. The sixth wrong exposed was the agricultural policy manipulation. Traoré explained how the IMF forces African nations to abandon food self-sufficiency in favor of cash crop production for export. Countries that once grew enough rice, wheat, and corn to feed their populations are now told to focus on cocoa, coffee, and cotton for Western markets. This creates food dependency, where African nations must import basic, staples at inflated prices while their best farmland produces luxury, goods for foreign consumption. When global food prices spike, as they did in recent years, African families starve while their fields are full of crops they cannot eat. The seventh and final truth Traore revealed was perhaps the most damning: the IMF's role in perpetuating political instability. He explained how the harsh austerity measures and economic hardships imposed by IMF conditions create social unrest, which then leads to political chaos. This instability is then used to justify further intervention, more loans, and deeper control. It's a cycle that keeps Africa dependent, divided, and unable to chart its own course. Traore shared how previous Burkinabe governments that tried to resist IMF dictates faced coups, sanctions, or mysterious political crises. The message was clear: comply or face consequences. As Traore concluded his speech, he made a powerful declaration that resonated across continents. Burkina Faso, under his leadership, would no longer accept the IMF's terms of enslavement. They would seek true partnerships based on mutual respect, not predatory lending. They would prioritize their people's well-being over foreign creditors' profits. They would reclaim their sovereignty over their resources, their currency, and their future. The speech didn't just end at the UN. It sparked conversations in capitals across Africa, Asia, and Latin America. Other leaders began questioning their own relationships with the IMF. Citizens began demanding answers about where their national wealth was actually going. The global financial establishment tried to dismiss Traore as inexperienced or radical, but the facts he presented were undeniable. Ibrahim Traoré's courage that day reminded the world that truth, when spoken with conviction, has the power to challenge even the mightiest institutions. His 7 revelations about the IMF weren't just accusations. They were a detailed indictment backed by decades of evidence that anyone could verify. Whether the world would listen and act on these truths remains to be seen. But one thing became certain that day: the emperor had been shown to have no clothes, and Africa was no longer willing to pretend otherwise.